Welcome back. In the long hours at Rambouillet, the Kosovar Albanian delegation was asked to put its faith in Western promises of military protection and significant political gains. Madeleine Albright called it the best deal they could hope for. The Albanians agreed in principle, but they didn't sign. Was that a mistake? Joining us now is Joe DioGuardi, a former U.S. Congressman, now with the Albanian American Civic League. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Jonathan.
Why didn't they sign, and what does agreement in principle really amount to, do you think?
Well, they didn't sign for a simple reason, because the agreement as it stands now would be nothing less than a death warrant for the Albanian Kosovars. You have to remember how this began. It began in 1987 when Slobodan Milosevic rose to power by coming to Kosovo on a platform of anti-Albanian racism and Greater Serbia. He occupied Kosovo in 1989, took away all the jobs, all the schools, all the courts, the separate parliament of Kosovo. Everything was removed. The Kosovars have lived in a concentration camp for 10 years. There's been nothing like this since Adolf Hitler created the concentration camps in Germany. They cannot go back. They have declared their independence in a referendum in 1991. The Slovenes did, and they got out. The Croatians did, and they got out. The Bosnians did, and they got out. And by the way, they are all Slavs, just like the Serbs. The Albanians are not Slavs. Why should they be forced to live with people who treat them like untermenschen?
So let me ask you, once again, they left with the impression that they agreed in principle. Were they just being polite? Is this really a non-starter to any Kosovar Albanian nationalist, this kind of a deal?
I believe that what happened in Rambouillet was a failure. I predicted it would be, because unless we were prepared to use force, and we have declared that we were prepared, how many times, I can't count. The only reason that the carnage in Bosnia stopped is that we finally, after 2 years, after losing 250,000 people, struck the military installations of Slobodan Milosevic, and then Dayton began. There were no strikes before Rambouillet. There were no troops put into Kosovo. So why should Milosevic believe in anything? And by the way, he didn't go to Rambouillet. These talks were doomed to begin with. And now the appearance is being given that the burden for not signing is being put on the Albanian Kosovars. It's wrong. And now they're creating parity. I heard the deputy ambassador. The real terrorist is Slobodan Milosevic. He's been in effect indicted by the U.S. Senate in a resolution last June, by the U.S. House of Representatives in a resolution last September, a month later by the European Parliament. All have said that his acts in Bosnia and Kosovo are enough to bring him to The Hague to be indicted as a war criminal. Why are we dealing with a war criminal? Why is Holbrooke and Hill spending any time with this man?
Well, let me jump in and ask you a question. The U.S. government has been reluctant as well to throw in its lot with the KLA. There's a feeling in Washington, I don't have to tell you, that the KLA are a proto-terrorist group who were themselves responsible for ethnic cleansing of Serbs, getting them out of Kosovo.
Not at all. This is Serbian propaganda, and when we approached a hearing on March 12th, just about a year ago, when the word terrorist was mistakenly used by Gelbard. He was asked questions by Congressman Gilman and Congressman Lee Hamilton, then the ranking Democrat. He backed right off. He says, no, it has not been declared a terrorist organization. These people are freedom fighters. How many years can you live under the control of a brutal dictator with your families being killed, towns being destroyed, people being disappeared and tortured, until you say we now have to defend ourselves because we see the West is not willing to defend us?
If that's the case, and if that's the conclusion that they've drawn, and if that's the right conclusion, March 15th, they're going to be called back to France and asked to disarm and put their faith in a Western guaranteed agreement with Slobodan Milosevic. Should Kosovar Albanians agree to anything of that kind, giving up weapons and hoping for the best for the future in March or at any other time?
I doubt that they will, because we have seen from experience that you cannot trust Slobodan Milosevic. He's a liar. He's a war criminal. He's an ultra-nationalist who's now breaking bread with Mr. Zyganov in Russia and Belarus. He's trying to create a new Greater Serbia that goes way beyond the Balkans. How can we trust this man? Without U.S. troops as part of a NATO force in Kosovo, nothing can begin. And it seems to me that they didn't want to discuss that. And what happened was Madeleine Albright, to save face, shifted in the last few days to blaming the Albanians for not signing, because she knew the Serbs would never accept a U.S. peacekeeping or a NATO peacekeeping force.
Joe DioGuardi of the Albanian American Civic League, thanks so much for this.
Thank you.